Hey everybody, welcome to Microbiomes 2.6, evaluating evidence about bacteria. In our last lesson, 2.5, we used the reasoning tool and we were introduced to that. And the whole point behind the reasoning tool was to really help us to figure out how do I show that the evidence is actually backing up my claim. Because it's not just enough to say like, oh, here's all my evidence, but you have to say why the evidence matters. And that makes for a much more convincing argument. So we're going to revisit that. Let's go ahead and jump to our warm-up, if it will go for me. There you go. And I'm going to go ahead and open it right here in Amplify. And it says, warm-up, It wants you to evaluate. It wants you to read your draft of your initial argument and evaluate it based on the criteria below. Select how well you completed each task. Did you state your claim clearly? And be honest with yourself. I'm not grading you right now based on whether you say definitely or not at all. Did you include evidence to support the claim? And did you make your reasoning clear by explaining how the evidence supports the claim? Get out of here. Get out of here, box, window thing. Okay. So go read your argument and answer these questions. Okay. And then once you do that, come back to me. All right, in activity 2, we're going to analyze some experiments about bacteria, as the title says. We're going to look at some of the subclaims that we dismissed the other day because we were more focused on how bacteria takes up food and space to prevent other bacteria from getting a foothold in our microbiome. But we're going to look at some of those other subclaims too. So we explained this, that the helpful bacteria transferred into the gut during a fecal transplant use up food and space in the gut, making it harder for the harmful bacteria to survive. But there are other ways that fecal transplants can help. There's other things that these bacteria do. Let's take a look at some of those. Today, you'll be gathering evidence to support one of the remaining 2 subclaims. So I have a whole bunch of evidence cards. You may have seen those attached to your lesson as a PDF. So let's take a look at what those other claims were. This one right here. So our claim was a fecal transplant can work to cure a patient infected with very harmful bacteria, such as C. difficile in many ways. The one that we already argued for was right here. But here's these other ones. Bacteria from the fecal transplant can help the patient's body produce immune cells that kill invading bacteria. Interesting. And here's our other subclaim. Bacteria from the fecal transplant can help the patient's body produce mucus that protects the gut from invading bacteria. So these are also benefits of a fecal transplant. Well, let's take a look at some experiments here. Remember, experiments with mice can help scientists get evidence about the microbiome. We're going to look at 2 experiments with mice, and you are going to focus on one of them. So what did we do? We bred mice with only one type of bacteria. In this case, it was B. fragilis. B. fragilis. Scientists bred mice with gut microbiomes full of only one type of bacteria in experiment 2. They used mice with only the B. fragilis bacteria in their gut microbiomes. Well, to compare, the scientists also bred mice with no bacteria in their gut microbiome. How did they do that? I don't know. I didn't conduct the experiment. Then they tested all the mice to see how healthy they were. In experiment 3, it was similar, but instead of B. fragilis, they produced mice with only L. reuteri bacteria in their gut. And similar to the other one, they already had mice with no bacteria in their gut, okay? In both experiments, the scientists tested the levels of immune cells in each mouse's gut. They also tested the level of mucus that lines the gut in order to see how healthy each mouse's gut microbiome was after the experiment. Here we see some of the results of the experiment. You're going to just focus on one of those bacteria, either B. fragilis or L. reuteri. And eventually you're going to read an article, part of an article about each of those, or one of those bacteria. So you can choose just one of them to focus on. And here is the results of the B. fragilis bacteria experiment. How does B. fragilis bacteria in the gut microbiome affect mouse gut health? So in Amplify, you have both of these experiments that you can look at, and you can look at the results of each one, see what is going on. Just choose one of these, again, and examine the results. And you're focusing on the level of immune cells, the level of gut mucus, and what do you notice? What what conclusions can you draw from whichever of these that you choose to focus on? Add some annotations. Remember, we click that button up there, and we can move our annotation all around. Like, hey, I noticed that this one looks tasty. Good. Okay. Once you finish annotating whichever experiment that you want, make sure you click hand in, and then come back to me, and we'll go to the next thing. So you just finished your annotations, and next we are reading about bacteria. And this is the part that I talked about earlier, where you're just choosing one. If you analyzed experiment 2, you will read about B. fragilis. If you analyzed experiment 3, you'll read about L. reuteri. Actively read. Make sure you add annotations. And check this out. Examine all visual representations carefully. Check out those visual representations to see how well they can actually help you understand what's going on and what the text is talking about. So in Amplify, you'll click on Activity 3. And that's this part right here. Here's your article. If you just scroll down, it'll load. Give it a second. And then, just like before, you can add annotations. Then you will hit next, or oh, I'm sorry, it's right here. Oh, either one. There's 2 different articles. Sorry. Then you'll hit hand in after you finish your annotations. Okay. So what I'd like you to do after you have read and annotated, find one annotation that you would like to share. And then when we meet together as a class, I would love for you to share that annotation. So be ready to share that. And these 2 subclaims. So based on the experiment that you focused on and the bacteria that you read about, which of these subclaims does it support? It's not that one of these is wrong. It's just which of the subclaims did the evidence that you looked at support? Okay. Now, let's go ahead and jump to Activity 4. We're going to use the evidence gradient. Now, I included a video in our lesson on using the evidence gradient. Basically, what the evidence gradient is, it's a tool to help us visually look at, okay, how we have a bunch of evidence to support our claim, but how strong is each piece of evidence? So remember, we are making arguments about fecal transplants, how fecal transplants can be beneficial to the gut microbiome. Let's look at our evidence. This is the evidence gradient right here. If we were in the classroom, I'd have a poster of this up on the wall, and I'd give each of you a copy so you would have it at your desk. We'll use it to compare and evaluate pieces of evidence. Today, we'll be rating evidence according to how well it supports our subclaims. At the top, this is where we're going to put our strongest evidence. Down at the bottom, we'll put our weaker evidence here. Mr. Wiggin, what if a piece of evidence is irrelevant? It doesn't go on there at all, right? If it's irrelevant, we just kind of put it to the side, okay? So we'll be practicing by deciding how well a piece of evidence of these 2 cards supports subclaim 2. I don't have clips. The cards aren't here in front of you. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at these evidence cards. So how strongly does card C support the claim? And D. Let's look at card C, actually. I have it right here, and you have these attached to your lesson. So what is the claim that we're actually supporting? Subclaim 2, I can't read it. Which one was subclaim 2? Subclaim 2 was, I believe, this one. Bacteria from the fecal transplant can help the patient's body produce immune cells that kill invading bacteria. So we're focusing on those immune cells. So here is evidence card C from the Human Microbiome article. Most bacteria in the human microbiome won't hurt you. In fact, the opposite is true. Many bacteria do important jobs for the human body. So does that help? Does that support subclaim 2 that fecal transplants can be helpful because they help the body produce immune cells? Sort of. I mean, it is talking about how bacteria do important jobs. It's not very specific, but it is talking about how they do important jobs for you. So would you put that more towards the top or more towards the bottom? Is that a really strong piece of evidence or kind of just an okay piece of evidence? The next one, evidence card D, here we go, from bacteria, B. fragilis. Bacteria like B. fragilis help the body produce immune cells that kill harmful bacteria. Oh, and look, we have an illustration right here. Here's our gut cells. Here's our immune cells. Okay. How strongly does that support our subclaim that bacteria from the fecal transplant can help the patient's body produce immune cells that kill invading bacteria? I think that would go closer to the top, wouldn't you? Because it's directly talking about how this specific type of bacteria that gets transferred during a fecal transplant can help specifically produce immune cells. So you have all of that evidence. I've attached it, like I said, as a PDF. You're choosing just one of those subclaims, and what I want you to do is evaluate the evidence. I know it says work with a partner. You can if you can find a partner. Otherwise, look through the evidence, decide first, is it relevant or irrelevant? We already did that. And next, you're going to decide how strongly it actually supports your subclaim, okay? There you go. Work on that right now. Sort through those evidence cards. Decide how strongly they support your subclaim. Hey, one thing I forgot to tell you to do is on activity 4, make sure you answer these questions too. Which experiment did you analyze, and which claim do you think the evidence from the experiment helps support? Okay, and then you're supposed to do that before you evaluate the evidence, but it really doesn't matter what order you do that in. Let's go ahead and jump to your homework. So what you're going to do is you're going to evaluate your argument. And you're going to draft another press release. You're going to revise to include evidence that supports subclaim 1. So go back, look at your argument that you wrote, and what I want you to do is include more evidence, if you have some, to include to support subclaim 1 is essentially what you're doing. So in Amplify, if you go to the homework, here you go. Right down here. So our subclaim was bacteria from the fecal transplant can fill up the space in the gut, limiting the food and space for invading harmful bacteria. So initially, we just said how a fecal transplant can help a person. There's benefits to helping a person recover from an infection. Now we want to make sure we include specific evidence and reasoning to support subclaim 1 in our argument. Maybe you already did include a lot of good evidence and a lot of good reasoning that supports subclaim 1. Excellent, nice job. But go back and try to take a really good, honest look at it and see if there is anything that you can revise, anything that you can add to make your argument that much stronger. So if you have any questions, let me know. Good luck with that. And hey, we'll see you next time.